Siege's overall meta has taken a massive shift in the past couple of years. Operators that were once considered meta have fallen far behind and have been replaced by newer operators. Lion is no exception to this rule. Over the years, he has gone through a roller coaster of balancing changes. He's gone from being one of the most overpowered operators on attack to being one of the worst operators in the game, to now, in his current state, being pretty balanced. Today, I'll be telling the history of Lion's balancing and how he fell from the top. Let's go ahead and get started. During Lion's testing phase, content creators and pro players were invited out to test him along with all the other content releasing in Operation Chimera. During this testing phase, they complained to Ubisoft about how he was going to be a problem if he released in the state he did, going as far as to say he would end up being the strongest character ever introduced. This sentiment was shared by pretty much everyone who got their hands on the content early during alpha testing. Big names like Pingu and Fabian from Penta Esports at the time had major complaints about this during alpha testing. However, Ubisoft eventually decided to do nothing about it and released him into Operation Chimera's test servers. This test server allowed the community to test the new PvE mode called Outbreak alongside the two new operators, Finka and Lion. People immediately saw Lion as a threat to the competitive integrity of Siege. The community began sharing similar sentiment to the alpha testers mentioned earlier, claiming that an operator with wall hacks would leave the game in disarray and would make attacking incredibly easy. However, once again, Ubisoft decided to ignore the criticism and would decide to roll out him to the live build without any changes. The operation he was included in, Operation Chimera, would release on March 6th, 2018. Now, if you don't know what Lion's gadget was like on launch, let me fill you in. His gadget was an aerial drone that, when activated, would allow you to scan the map for moving defenders, just like today. However, he was able to use these scans 3 times, and when activated, the defenders that moved would be outlined through walls. This allowed him to have an immense amount of map pressure at his fingertips. He was a force to be reckoned with. He had access to a 50-round drum mag on his Vector, solid secondary gadgets, the P9 pistol, and the most overpowered gadget to ever come to Siege. This is what Fabian had to say about Lion in a post-match interview in Pro League.
It doesn't really matter how our team plays because we play Lion, we press 4 and we sprint and we kill people. That's how the game works right now.
Fair point.
Eventually, with all the backlash Ubisoft was receiving not only from content creators and pro players, but also just the community in general, they ended up nerfing Lion in the mid-season patch for Operation Chimera. With this patch, they would remove a scan from him, leaving him with only 2 scans available. They doubled the cooldown between his scans, and they allowed defenders, if they stopped moving, to no longer be scanned. Now, this may seem like an incredibly good balance update, and you may think that this would have made Lion a lot more balanced. However, Lion was barely affected by this, and he continued to ravage the community. It got so bad that pro players started banding together to get Lion banned from pro play altogether, and this wasn't a small portion of pro players either. Pro League commentators also started making fun of the state of the game because of how laughable Lion was. This led to Lion's eventual banning from all forms of pro play.
We will put Lion in a competitive quarantine, which means that the players will not be able to pick Lion in our esports programs. Our esports programs are the Weekly Go 4, the Challenger League, the Pro League, the Minors, and the Majors.
Making him the first operator in Siege's history to be barred from pro play. To this day, no one else has joined him in this monumental achievement. He would remain banned until his eventual rework that would release a whole 8 months after his initial release. This rework would end up coming in Operation Burnt Horizon's mid-season patch. This rework included a lot of changes. The biggest change being that defenders would no longer be outlined when his scan went off. They would just be pinged as if they were being spotted by a camera. On top of this, they would also make the scan only last 2 seconds instead of 4. To compensate for some of these rough nerfs, they gave him back his extra scan, so he now had 3 again, and the cooldown between scans was reduced to 15 from 27. This rework nerfed Lion massively. His pick rate and win rate began to decline over time until eventually he was considered to be one of the worst attacking operators in the game by a large majority of the community. His main strength was his ability to see defenders through walls, and the fact that they replaced the ability with just repetitive pings really hurt him as a whole. He would end up remaining at the bottom for over 3 years. However, it all began to change in our current operation. Operation Brutal Swarm brought us the new secondary gadget EMP Impacts. These have completely changed up the meta, and pretty much everyone who got access to these climbed the R6 tier list. What makes these gadgets so great is that they are basically Thatcher, but in the form of a secondary gadget. They allow you to counter Kaid with ease and to deal with whatever bandits or mute jammers are on reinforced walls. Ubisoft noticed that Lion needed some love, so he was one of the operators that got access to EMP Impacts. That, on top of him having having the Gon 6 a couple of seasons ago has made him a really strong choice for your roster. Currently, he has access to a 50-round primary assault rifle with solid damage and fire rate. Gon 6 is a secondary weapon, and access to EMP impacts as mentioned earlier. All of this on top of his primary gadget make him have a ridiculous amount of utility at his disposal. He is arguably one of the best operators with access to secondary EMPs. Obviously, because of this, he has been seeing a lot more play, and he is considered one of the more balanced operators right now. In conclusion, on release, Lion was by far the most broken operator to ever set foot into the Rainbow Six Siege scene. All of this was due to Ubisoft's extreme negligence. They specifically chose to not listen to the early testers like pro players and content creators, or even the players that ended up playing the test server. It got so bad he had to be banned from pro play entirely, and he eventually got nerfed and quickly became one of the worst operators in the game. He would stay this way until this season with the implementation of EMP impacts. As a whole, I think Ubisoft learned a lot from this debacle. We haven't had any operator release overpowered like this in a really long time. Whether you think this is a good thing or not is completely up to you. However, I do feel this whole situation has scared Ubisoft permanently. With recent operators like Grim and Sins being so bad, it makes me believe that Ubisoft is too scared to release an operator that is strong. So they just release mediocre operators and attempt to rebalance them over time. I hope that Ubisoft will eventually get more comfortable with releasing really good operators, but we'll have to see over time. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, I would appreciate it if you could consider subscribing. I'm trying to hit 3K subs by the end of the year, and your sub will make a difference. If I haven't earned your sub yet, you can go and watch this video where I talk about why I believe Zero is a terrible operator. Hopefully I'll see you there, and peace.